Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. Helen Keller is proof that impossible is just a word. Born on June 27, 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama, Helen Keller would soon be faced with two unfathomable realities. At 19 months old, Keller became ill with scarlet fever, leaving her with not one disability, but two. She was blind and deaf. Her childhood and the rest of her life from that moment on would not be something just to live, but something to overcome. At age 6, her parents, with help from friend Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the first practical telephone, applied at the Perkins Institute for the Blind in Boston. Helen was then taught for many years by Anne Sullivan, learning how to communicate. She learned to read and write in Braille and learned American Sign Language, but not visually, only by her sense of touch. Over time and through Sullivan's teaching, Helen was able to verbalize her words, not concisely, but well enough to be interpreted and understood with assistance. At age 12, Helen was able to publish her autobiographical sketch in the Youth's Companion. As a young child, Helen was described to be wild-tempered and very smart, and Sullivan wanted to approach teaching this unruly child with love and obedience. Helen at first struggled with the concepts of letters forming words and meanings, but then experienced a change. As Anne brought her to a water pump and put Helen's hand under the spout, spelling water in her other hand, Helen then realized that the signals and connections with words in the world around her, all without hearing or seeing a thing, just the water against her hand, meant something. Following this monumental discovery by Keller, she became more eager to learn, quickly mastering the alphabet. She began writing, her square handwriting lined pages upon pages. Helen's writing caught the attention of Mark Twain, who called both Helen and Napoleon the, quote, most interesting characters of the 19th century, end quote. As she gained new skills and knowledge, Helen Keller became determined to go to college. In 1898, she started going to Cambridge School for Young Ladies in preparation to attend Radcliffe College. She started at Radcliffe in 1900 and received her Bachelor of Arts in 1904, the first person who was both deaf and blind to do so. She overcame her disability in order to gain higher education, something unprecedented and a grand accomplishment. During college, her junior self published her first book, Story of My Life, which is still being printed in over 50 languages to this day. Before blind and deaf, disabled, a woman, Helen saw herself as a writer. Her inability to see, hear, or speak left her with a typewriter. Helen communicated with people across the world using her typed out words. From an early age, Helen was fighting for the underdogs. She used her writings to speak the truth, lift those who were pushed under, and spoke out against power. She was deeply involved in political and social activism, not only disabled activism, but women's and workers' rights activism. She protested U.S. involvement in World War I and was a huge advocate for women's suffrage and one of the first members of the American Civil Liberties Union. Helen's most lasting work was her work for AFB, or the American Foundation for the Blind. She worked for the organization for over 40 years and gave her a global platform to help those with vision loss. As a result of her work, rehabilitation centers, commissions, and education was made available for those suffering from vision loss. In 1946, Helen helped form a special service for deaf and blind people during World War II. She often visited World War II veteran hospitals and spread messages of faith and strength, which resonated with those who were injured. She first became active in the Permanent Blind War Relief Fund, or the American Braille Press, in 1915 and helped work with world leaders to shape global policy on vision loss. During her trips with the American Braille Press, she visited 35 countries on 5 different continents. She met with various world leaders, including Winston Churchill. Wherever she traveled, she brought encouragement along with her, inspiring many blind people to have faith, and encouraged efforts to improve conditions for those living with vision loss. She was able to travel the world, influence global leaders, inspire thousands, and speak out on important issues, all still being blind and deaf. Helen Keller passed away on June 1, 1968, a few weeks before her 88th birthday. She had suffered a stroke in 1960 and lived a very quiet life following. She made her last public appearance in 1961 in Washington, D.C. at a Lions Club International Foundation meeting. She then received a Lions Humanitarian Award for her service to humanity and her inspiration for the foundation to have blind aid programs. She died peacefully in her sleep. Her ashes were placed by her teacher Anne Sullivan's ashes so they could be together for eternity. Helen Keller never let her disability define her or confine her into a box with a restrictive life. Through her primary teachings from Anne Sullivan, her world expanded. Helen, who could barely speak, was able to learn how to communicate, learning Braille and sign language without hearing or seeing, just using her sense of touch. She used her new skills to not only communicate with those near her, but to communicate across the globe, spreading the message of faith and strength, that one could overcome anything. Helen was able to show the world that her disability was far from a disability. It was more than anything something she learned to overcome, adapt to, and learn greatly from. She was above everything else an amazing writer, speaking out for the underdog, spreading her words like wildfire. Even today, many of her works are still being published in over 50 languages, including Story of
And
My
on
Life
this
and Light in
inspiring
My
note,
Darkness. Her voice was strong, lifting up workers' and women's rights, standing up for the things that she felt strongly about. She used the voice she had to tell people she could not see nor hear to inspire them and encourage them to improve conditions for people just like her. Helen overcame the most seemingly impossible. She broke boundaries of language and communication, as well as revolutionizing them. She broke the box she was expected to be confined in, and will live on as a woman who showed the world that there are no boundaries to courage and strength. Helen Keller was seemingly impossible, but she made it possible. That is why she belongs in the A Push Hall of Fame.